I think that actually the internet and digital is probably one of the largest and fastest moving industry areas at the moment, and I think that I'm pretty confident in saying, and I think I'll be backed up by evidence, that there's lots of industries that will be affected by digital. Digital, if you think of the way that evolution works, I think digital is kind of the bigger beast that's going to come along and eat a lot of the smaller things. I mentioned earlier about Uber, the traditional model of taxi drivers has been kind of consumed by digital, and the same is true of Airbnb and obviously the hotel model. I'm not saying that the other industries will go away, but I think that everybody in every business, if they look at their business as it is now, and if there is a program or an algorithm that could be written that could replace what they do, they'll be in trouble. As we move forwards, people who can be replaced by computers and technology will do. And so the positive benefits of having a digital career is that, one, you'll be more able to use the systems that are being put in place. Two, you'll hopefully, if you've got that kind of mindset and you want to do it, you'll be part of that movement. You could actually be a digital artist or a developer, or maybe a project manager. No matter what it might be, there are going to be lots of opportunities and lots of wonderful roles in digital that are likenable to, I guess, what you might call real world jobs. So if, for example, you're an architect and your previous thought of your career was to build wonderful buildings, you get technical architects, of course, in web development, and although it's not the same thing, the same principles of understanding load bearing, the ways that people go in and out of a website, which bits of the websites need higher security as you might do on a building, the principles work quite closely. So although there may be a mindset shift that needs to happen in certain people, there is lots of careers in digital that people just don't assume. A lot of the time, actually, fun enough, the question that I was asked, what about a career in web design? A lot of people think of web design being a single human being designing a site and then coding it up. But of course, the days of that are long gone now. I mean, just in our company, there's 27 of us all together, and the amount of different specialisms that people have are very, very, they mean a lot to us, but somebody from the outside, they don't necessarily mean that much. For example, an app developer will have a very different skill set to a database developer, who have a very different experience and very different skill set to a designer, who also is different to a user tester. So often I've heard people say to me, because I used to lecture as well, often people say to me, oh, I don't like the idea of being stuck behind a computer all day, because they think digital means stuck behind a computer, banging away, just trying to get your work done. Whereas, for example, user testing and user research is a massive part of any good website development now, which is user research is the process and the thinking behind who are our users, and going out and meeting them and understanding what they want, understanding the context as well they're using the website. Are they using a mobile phone? Are they in a hurry? Do they enjoy using your service, or is it something they have to do, like, say, tax or MOT? So there's lots of different roles in digital, and so if somebody says, do you want to be a web designer, then I would say it depends if you like design. If someone says, do you want to be in digital, well, it depends if you want a job. I think it's one of the nicest industries that I've come across. Being as we're a service industry, we make websites and apps for all sorts of people. So you get a little short dive into other industries, and quite a lot of them are moving with the times, but some of them, of course, are a bit further behind. But I've yet to come across many people who work primarily in digital who aren't focused entirely on the user. And that mindset of how can we help people, how can we make digital a better place, and how can we make our website the best it can be, or our app the best it can be, tends to attract a certain type of person. And I mean, if you were to walk around our business, for example, meet some of the people in there, most of those people pass the "would you invite them to a barbecue" test. That silly thing that people say, would you invite a team member to a barbecue? And digital is resplendent with just wonderful people. So I think one of the nice things about the industry is the people in it. If I was to offer any advice to somebody who's just completed a course, or they've been self-taught in be it web design, web development, anything, the best thing to do is some proof in the pudding. So actually go and make something that somebody can look at and see the quality of your work. So if you're a designer or you want to be involved in the creative industries, then absolutely make yourself a portfolio. Push the envelope, make the portfolio all about what you want the web to be. The one thing I would say is a slight sort of counterbalance to that is that one of the things that I myself did and a lot of people do when they start on a creative route is you try to break down all of the frameworks and the paradigms and the things you've seen before, from the generation before. You think, oh, I'm going to do it all my own way. Always be respectful and cognizant of the reasons that people have done something. So yes, go out and make yourself a portfolio. Yes, push the boundaries, but also in that, make sure you definitely do some business as usual design. Something that a company or a business can look at and say, oh, I want one of those. So yes, choose some projects to push the envelope, but not all of them. And if you have that, whether you want a job or whether you want to go freelance or whether you want to go for further studies, the process of making something is the best experience you can get. The same is of course true of development, although often with a developer site, putting your work into GitHubs, making it public, joining places like Stack Overflow, and actually getting into the community of actually be able to solve problems with your code, that's your best way in. If I was going to give some advice to somebody starting out in their career, there's two very, very important things I'd say to everybody. The web is becoming user-centric. You know, gone are the days where everybody will get the same website as each other. That won't happen anymore. So understanding what user-centered design is imperative, whether you're a developer or a designer or a project manager. Basically, that is that you should work really hard as a web designer, developer or whatever, to make it really easy for the user. And continually asking yourself, is this what they want? And in that word of they, you should absolutely know who they are. You should definitely know what type of person they are, what they do for fun, how old they are, you know, do they have family, why are they using your service, how long do they have? All of those questions should be inherently in your head at all times. So that's the first one, user-centered, that's a really big push. The second is find a really good framework for delivery. So GDS, Government Digital Services, they've got a great thing which is a set of standards that you can look through. There's 18 points in it at the moment, and you can look through them, and it will basically be almost like a tick box of, is your site good? If you answer all of those 18 points, and you've done all of those 18 things, you can pretty much be guaranteed you'll have a much better web project out the other end. So no matter your career, familiarising yourself with the user-centered methodology, you know, finding a good set of standards to follow, a good set of checklists to follow, like the GDS design standards, they will serve you very well, and they will mean you can walk into a good job with a good company. It's a really good question about what skills we look out for when hiring people, and it's sometimes really hard. It's very, very hard to actually understand if someone's good at something or they've just written it down on their CV. For example, if you ask me, Paul, can you speak German? Yes, I can speak German. Can I speak German well? No, not really. I can just about get by. And it's quite difficult from CVs, and I understand the pressure on both the applicant and the recruiter, but it's quite difficult from CVs to actually understand if they're any good. So for the most part, we don't look at CVs. We'll look at them, check I've got a few tick boxes actually filled in, but then we'll look at their work. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you don't have an online portfolio, if you don't have something we can look at, you will not get an interview. But also, when they actually do come to the interview, everyone we speak to, we primarily make most of our questioning around what sort of human being they are. Are they somebody who's excited and ambitious to learn new things? Because we don't need somebody who comes and says, well, I'm a .NET developer, I'm a PHP developer, and I've been it for the last 20 years and I always will be, because the industry will change. What we want is somebody who comes in and says, oh, I've done a bit of that, I've done a bit of that, but at my heart, at my core, I understand how it works. Because if you understand how it works, the other bits are languages, and things that we can teach them. It's a constantly moving feast. The selection of languages we use every single time. We have company meetings quite regularly, and we talk about the newest technology. And every time we have one of these talks, which is at least once a month, there's a new one. There's something new to talk about, because everyone's trying to get that framework or language which is adopted heavily by the industry. For example, we're looking at the moment into things called PWAs, which are basically progressive web apps. So there's a big push by people like Google and Microsoft and Mozilla to stop us downloading hundreds of apps on our phones, because it's just wasteful. And also there's a barrier, there's the app barrier. So what happens is you'll say use BBC News, for example, a lot on your phone, just on the normal website, and then you might think, oh, okay, I'll go get the app. But then there's quite a few steps involved in getting it from the App Store, so generally you wouldn't download it. A lot of people just don't complete that process. So progressive web apps, the idea behind it is that once you use a website a set number of times, it will then say, would you like to install the app directly from the website? The app will then come down to your device, not passing the App Store, and it will be able to keep the data that you want offline. So if you want to look at offline storage, say photographs or videos, it has its own offline storage. And then what happens is when you get internet connection, it will go and retrieve the latest version of the app and put it on your device. The benefit of that to a user is that these apps can then just obviously be very quickly deleted and added in again with not much overhead, that it costs money. And the benefit to the companies is that they make one web product that has an app by another name, basically, that comes out of it. Whereas primarily what happens now is you'll build your website, then you'll hire a different company or the same company to build you another app, which will cost you another lump of money. And if your app is of a certain size, you may choose a native one in Android, a native one in Windows, and a native one in Apple, of course. So you may in fact pay for the same functionality 4 times. With progressive web apps, what you do is you actually make a central service that has multiple front ends, one being a mobile website, one being a desktop website, one being an app. So there's hundreds of these things we could cover. I mean, we could keep looking into, and we continually do. But the big ones for us are AWS, or moving into cloud engineering, moving further to cloud engineering. There's a massive opportunity there to really make hosting a lot more responsive and a lot more dynamic. There's a big push, as I mentioned, with what happens with apps. What's going to happen with apps? Because that's just everyone knows it's just getting bigger and bigger, and we have to do something soon. And the third of which I mentioned earlier, which is distributed development. The idea of, rather than having a single point of failure, being a single server or set of server, to distributing someone's web application or their service over hundreds or thousands or millions of computers to make it entirely secure. Those are kind of the 3 big watchwords.